Hello and welcome back to Ride Rescue. In this video I want to get this hood all prepped and ready to paint. In past videos I sanded this hood all down to bare metal and I put on several thick coats of epoxy primer surfacer. So now I need to get it all sanded down and ready. The epoxy primer was pretty orange peely, so I just knock it down flat with a 400 grit sandpaper. You can start out with a 320 if you want to knock it down faster, but it's fairly smooth. So the 400 is working really well. I sprayed the whole thing with a guide coat first. I started sanding it and I just couldn't tell if I had it all smooth and if I'd gotten all the scratches yet. So by spraying on a guide coat, it's real obvious where I've sanded and whether I have all of that surface completely smooth. I typically use just a dark primer for my guide coat and just kind of skim it all over because it's pretty inexpensive. I end up using quite a bit, so I thought I would try this guide coat that I got through Eastwood's. It's amazing. It is well worth the extra cost, and I think it will last a lot longer than even a can of dark primer. It's nice to be able to get the dark primer easy, but while I'm ordering supplies, I ordered this too. You can see how it goes on. It mists on real light and quick and easy, and it dries really quick too, so you can get right to work, where the primer takes a little bit longer to dry. So I'm not getting paid to sponsor a product. I just like to tout something that really works well. So I'm impressed. Now you can see how quickly I can start sanding and it's not gumming up my paper. I'll go ahead and finish up the rest of this sanding, and this hood is ready to paint. And speaking of painting, I can't resist to not customize. That hot rod side of me, I want to do some custom painting on this hood. So my plan here, if it works, I want to put a stripe here that matches the dash. It's hard to explain from just that, but I'll show you in a minute. So what I'm going to start by doing is I want to lay out how I want this stripe to look. And I'm going to have it two-tone. Well, it's actually three-tone. There'll be a stripe on the outside here that's about the width of this tape, and that will be in a dark burgundy. So to do this piece, what I want to do is I want to start with that burgundy, and I'm going to start with a hard edge, and then I'm just going to kind of blend it in so that when I paint this area, I'll tape off and I'll overlap that burgundy so that I will end up having a hard edge on both sides. And then I can sand this area and get ready for my next two colors. What I'm using is a vinyl hardline tape. Works great for taping lines like this. And for an area like this, I want to follow this body line. There's not a whole lot to really follow. It's pretty faint right here on the edge. So it's just gonna have to just get a feel for it. These are always tough. It's a trial and error. This is a really good tape, so you can pick it up, you can put it down, you can stretch it. Just keep playing with it till you get the look you're after. I want to want to fill it on the edge of the top of that peak. Ignore my boo-boo. Just putting the hood on to make sure all my edges and everything lined up, and my fender, that fender over there, lined up. I wanted really perfect edges, and I caught the fender and I caught the hood under the fender. I went back just a little bit too far, and when I pulled it down, it put a dent in the aluminum right here. But it's fixed. I want to make sure all your edges are down firm. I don't want any paint creeping under the edges. And this vinyl tape gives you a really nice clean cut edge. I want to clean the surface. I'm using the prep. You want to tack rag it off. This dark burgundy is just a hint of color. I don't want it to really stand out. At the same time, I want to paint the tow hooks, but I don't want them to really stand out either. A lot of guys do red. I don't want it to be a brilliant, bright red or orange, so I'm going to do these in burgundy as well. Once the burgundy stripe is dry, I sanded it all down and blended it into the primer along both sides and left the hard edge. And then I will mask it all off to the area that I want to keep, and then the rest I'll cover up with the other color. It's kind of hard to tell where I'm going with this right now, but there's kind of a burgundy stripe that'll go around the outside, and then the two-tone effect in here is going to match the inside of the dash cluster. And this truck, it's brushed steel. So I'm going to mimic a brushed steel. If I can make it work, I'll put down a coat of a gray. I'm on a dark, kind of a steel gray. And then I'm going to sand it with 80 grit sandpaper to leave a good sand scratch in it. And then I will cover it with a candy black and then sand off the tops of those ridges that the candy black is setting on top of, and that will show the ridges. The candy will stay on the bottom of the scratch, and we'll hopefully have a somewhat simulation of what's on the dash. We'll see. Put on probably 2 medium coats of that steel gray. As soon as it cures, I'll unmask it, and then I'll run some coarse sandpaper across it, and then I will paint all of this area with the candy black. Went on really good. This fine line tape, I want to get it off as soon as possible. I ended up putting the paint on a little thicker than I would have really liked it to be, so it's going to be a pretty hard edge. So I want to be able to feather that edge down, and then when I put on the candy black, I'll be able to feather that out a little bit. And then when I sand it, and then put on the hood color, and then all the clear, I should be able to color sand that down to where it's just completely hidden on all these edges. But like I said, I don't want to wait too long, but if I pull it while it's sticky, then you get little wicks that fly off into the paint. I don't want that either. So it's still a little bit tacky. But I'm going to get started on it. I'll at least take off the tape and paper. See how it wicks. Perfect time to take off the tape. The colors turned out perfect. I want it to be just subtle. I don't want it to be, you know, like a bright orange or a bright red. So the burgundy is just subtle. Against the black in the light, it'll pop. And then the steel gray, once that's sanded, and then with the candy on top of it, it'll have that brushed steel look. Now I got to play around with the black. I'm going to put it on. I might just use a can of black paint. Just some semi-gloss, flat, anything really, since I'm going to clear coat it. If I just kind of mist it on and then sand off with a real fine grit sandpaper, it'll sand the tops and leave the paint in the bottom of all those scratches. Just for fun, I'm going to start with a 320 sandpaper. Just do it dry, just so I can kind of get an idea of what it's going to look like. I had to get it wet to be able to see it. And there, now you can see the grains. So there's some black grains in there. It's really not going to stand out when it's sanded until I get a clear on it. Okay, finally, the hood is finished. And I thought, with the lighting that I had, that I went too far on fading the black, but actually when you get it out here in the sun, it's perfect. It's just exactly what I had in mind. You can still see a faint edge. You can see the sanded metal grains, just like what's in that instrument cluster. You see the dark burgundy. Now it makes more sense. It just kind of all flows together. Gives that subtle custom look. When it's not in the sun, it disappears. You see a little bit of that brushed look right here when it's not in the sun, when it's in the shade, or when it's in the garage. But got a little bit of trash in it, but not bad. It flowed out really nice. Thought I'd set it out here in the sun and let it cure quicker so I can get it back on the truck. I'm excited. Got all the fender well trim done too, the fender flares. This truck is ready to go back together. Now that the paint is cured hard, I can color sand it. Get rid of some of the trash that's in it. You can see just a few little spots, nothing bad. But the main reason I want to color sand this and buff it is these lines. So the tape lines, when I did the striping, I put on 4 or 5 coats. Yeah, I think it was 5 coats of clear along this area. So that'll give me plenty of coating to sand down smooth, and then these tape lines will disappear. And I started color sanding now. I'll go through all the steps: 1200, 2000, 2500, 3000, 5000, and then I'll buff it. Pretty exciting, getting close to the end of this project. So I've gone through 1200 grit sandpaper and 2000 grit sandpaper, and now's a good time to really clean it up and look for scratches. You see this scratch right there. That will probably show up after it's buffed. There's a little bit of scratching right here that'll show up. It's looking good. This low spot right here needs to be sanded a little bit more. But overall, I'm very pleased. It's a lot of work. At this point, doing the 1200 grit sandpaper and the 2000 grit sandpaper, I'm 4 hours doing it by hand. So yeah, it is a lot of work. It would be nice to use some power tools, but I wanted to do it this way so you can see what most guys would be getting into, doing it in their garage, doing it all by hand. I'm noticing the ribs from the detail work. In between each one of those, you can see where this looks darker, it's actually more polished. So I need to go over that area better too, so that I'll get the best deep shine possible. So just to recap, the 1200, the 2000, and the 2500 sandpaper, I use a sanding block. I won't sand it again, I've already gone through all that. I don't want to scuff it up. And then when you get to the 3000 grit and the 5000 grit, I have these foam pads. They're 3M pads. They're great. And you can just use them with some soap and water, just like you're washing the vehicle or doing a wax or polish. And you can swirl it on. You can rub it all straight in directions. You don't have to worry about leaving swirl marks or sand scratches, because then your buffer is going to do that. At 5000 now, and I'll just do it the same way. Some guys will go to a wool pad, but it just cuts too much. So you end up skipping the 3000 and the 5000 grit sandpaper, and you just hit it with a wool pad. I don't like the finish that I get with the wool pads. I've experimented with them, I've tried a lot, I'm not, whether I'm not experienced, I don't know. I just don't like what I get. So So with this pad, I feel like I have better control, and I use a swirl remover. So instead of going to a fine cut or a heavy cut like you would with the wool pad, I will go with a very fine cut or a swirl remover polisher, and that seems to work better for me. This is just with one quick buff. You can see that reflection. And this is just with the swirl remover. I'll use the show glaze with this foam pad next, and it just brings out a deep, deep glow. Thanks for checking out my channel. I'm here to learn, to teach, and hopefully to inspire. Hit my subscribe button. I really appreciate you subscribing. Leave me a comment. I love hearing from you. If you like what I'm doing, please give me a like. Thanks again for watching.